Hello, Danger Noodles. Sorry for being late to stream. Narcolepsy's a bitch. I mean, am I wrong? Am I wrong, Jerry?
On y'all know.
Alright, we ready to hear some. Alright, so I'm not sure if I'll have time for other um creepypastas tonight, but I do have a bunch of Pokemon ones that were kicked off the site for no reason. I saw nothing problematic with them. I double checked. So, yes. And the first one, I also found out while I was proofreading, there's a game of it. So not only do I have the Pokemon Black game that I need to do, the Pokemon, not this one, this Pokemon game, as well as Polybius. I think I'll play all three come Sunday instead of horror stories, because I'm pretty sure they're short. And if they're really really short, then I'll read horror stories. But yeah, I just thought I'd announce that. How do you feel about that, Jerry? All I heard was
Close enough.
right. All right. Anyway, we ready?
Yeah.
All right. Three, two, one. Pokemon Lost Silver. You see, I am a simple college student living alone in an apartment. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver here in the States. I have purposely locked myself out of all media and the internet aside for school purposes. That means no 4chan, no Reddit, no Bulbapedia, etc. As I was busy with the school year and being poor at the time, I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver on its launch date. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver on Amazon. However, it would take a week for it to arrive. I decided during that time I would replay my crystal version on my Game Boy Color. However, I realized that long ago my mom threw it away because I told her the save went dead, and I was very upset about it then. She also threw away my silver version, so all I have is my Game Boy Color. As such, I set out to GameStop and bought a used silver version, as it's the only Pokemon game left that they have for the Game Boy Color. $10. Fairly cheap. I went home and started it up for a nostalgia trip. However, that's where things started getting bizarre. And most likely the reason why you read this. The Game Freak logo started up as normal, but it just froze there. I thought the cart was just errored or something, so I turned it off and on. The same thing happened. I tried pressing A and start over and over, and all the buttons. Eventually the logo vanished, and there was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Suddenly, rather than going to the usual menu screen, I was already in the game in a previous saved file, which was odd as I was expecting all of these carts to have been wiped by the poor battery. Either way, I wasn't complaining, as I would have chosen the continue option to see what the previous guy did anyways. First off, I checked the trainer's information. His name was just dot dot dot. He didn't have much originality. I checked his profile, and apparently he had 999 hours and 99 seconds put into the game, with all 16 badges. 900. No, wait, sorry. $99,999.99 in all 251 Pokemon on the Pokedex. Seeing as he apparently had Mew and Celebi logged also, I am guessing he either used a Game Genie or was a really hardcore Pokemon player back then. I checked his Pokemon to see what a badass team he has. To my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns and a 6th Pokemon named Hurry. I'm thinking that this must be some cruel joke by the person who last played the game, but I decided to check the profiles for those Pokemon anyways. As expected, they were different letters of unknown, all level 5. I was a bit shaky with my unknown alphabet at the time, but I identified the word spelled out to be leave. As for 6 Pokemon, it turned out to be Cyndaquil. The Cyndaquil looked normal, but it was level 5 with only 1 HP left, with only 2 attacks, Leer and Flash. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time, I just disregarded it. The most eerie thing was that despite my volume being at max, none of the Pokemon he had said their usual cries. Just pure silence. Having enough of the team, I closed it. I was parked at what appears to be a room inside Bellsprout Tower. However, for some reason, there were no NPCs around. Even more eerie was that the pillar in the middle didn't move at all, as if just leaning on its side. There's no music at all, and there's no exit or ladder, or at least I thought there wasn't. I walked around for a few minutes but can't seem to find a way out. This was certainly not a room I've seen in Bellsprout Tower before. I tried checking my items for an escape rope, but the bag was completely empty. There wasn't any wild Pokemon either. Finally, I managed to find a ladder, which turned out to be behind the pillar. The screen turned black, and the music finally started playing. I had a sudden chill as I recognized the melody I heard to be the theme you hear when you listen to the radio at the Alph Ruins, where the unknowns were at. I immediately realized that it wasn't a loading transition, but rather I was in a dark room and would need flash. Before I took care of that, though, I immediately checked my Pokegear to change the radio to something more pleasant. But it turns out there was no radio card, or even a phone, nor time cards. There was only a map card in which Gold was just walking in a mist of black. I recalled that Cyndaquil has Flash, so I turned off my Pokegear and made Cyndaquil use Flash. I didn't see a message saying Hurry has used Flash or anything like that. The room just became lit, just like that, and I soon regretted it. The room was a chilling blood red, with a linear gray path leading south. The ladder I used to go up and down was not there at all. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made, until I finally made it to the end, which appears to be a sign, or the sign which said, "Turn back now." Suddenly I was asked to answer yes or no, but there was no question asked. I chose yes, as I do not know what I was asking. The screen went black again, making a ladder climb sound. The unknown radio music, and in a few seconds, was replaced with the not as creepy Pokeflute radio music. I was in another dark room, but I held my breath and used Flash again. Suddenly it said that Hurry has fainted, which was odd since I recall that there was no status conditions like poison on him. I clearly wasn't in a battle. I checked my Pokemon quickly, and suddenly he was no longer my party. In fact, after a bit of investigating, none of my Pokemon are there, but instead all replaced with level 10 unknown. I did the same thing as before and spelled out the unknown. I then team of unknown spelled he died. Either way, after that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that appears to be only 4 squares big. The walls of that room were gray bricks, as if I was inside something that was hollowed out. Outside that room appears to be a bunch of graves similar to the ones in Pokemon Red and Blue. I walked around in a small room and pressed A, but nothing happened. I've already concluded that this was clearly a hacked game, and some sadistic fuck sold it to GameStop. However, my curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of ... Again, only to find out that the sprite of Gold was missing his arms. He also seemed to appear less smug, but rather seems more sad and empty in a way that I do not know how to describe. For some reason, it also now said that he has 24 badges, which was clearly impossible. After a few minutes of aimless wandering, my character suddenly spun and did the escape rope spinning animation. Instead of flying up, though, my character spun downward slowly, as if sinking. After that screen, the music stopped. After finally landing, the overworld sprite of Gold is colored differently now. Instead of the usual red color he dons, he appears completely white now, including his skin. It's as if he came straight from the colorless Game Boy games placed into a colored background of the Game Boy Color. I checked his profile, and now it is as white as his overworld sprite. He lost his legs and has what appears to be bloody tears from his eyes. It also says he now has 32 badges, which now starts to stir me, as this change of number seems to represent something important. I also checked my Pokemon, which this time contained 5 unknowns and a level 100 Celebi without a nickname. The unknown at this time, level 15, and spelled out dying. I checked the Celebi's profile. It was a shiny Celebi, except there was only half of the sprite. 1 leg, 1 arm, 1 eye. It only has 1 attack. Perish Song. The area I was in itself was the Sprout Tower with the immobile pillar as before, except everything is apparently red now. I walked north for what felt like forever. Eventually, I finally encountered some generic men and women NPC. They were all lined up to the side, just facing the long slanted pillar in the middle. They were also white, and nothing happens when I try to speak to them. I kept on going north until eventually the pillar finally appears chopped off, with a transparent red in that spot. I went up to red, and without even pressing A, I was suddenly engaged and finally in a battle. The music starts again, which it sounds like the unknown radio music again, but played backwards. Gold's battle back sprite matches its front one with the bloody eyes, white skin, and lack of arms, while Red sprite was the same as before in GSC, except transparent. The text simply said, "Wants to battle," as if he has no name. Both of us only have 1 Pokemon each, which is weird, as I swore I had 6 with the unknowns. My shiny Celebi came out conveniently with half a sprite for the back sprite also. The shiny noise and animation was different. as the sounds it made sound like multiple screech attacks used consecutively. Red sent out a seemingly normal male Pikachu, except he is level 255 and his sprite seems sad and has tears in his eyes. Rather than the usual fight item Pokemon run menu, I was only given the option to use the attacks. Since Celebi only has one, I chose it. Naturally, since Pikachu was level 255, he went first. Pikachu used Curse, lowering its speed and increasing his other stats. Not even sure Pikachu could use Curse. Celebi used Pear Song. In 3 turns, both Pokemon get KO'd. Not like I have a choice. At this point, I didn't even go back to the fight menu, as the battle just continued without me. Also note that there are no animations at all for some reason. Pikachu used Flail, which didn't do much damage despite his level and boost, as his health was maxed. Celebi used Parasong. Nothing happens, as was already used. Pikachu used Frustration, which did a shit ton of damage, knocking Celebi down to less than 10 HP. Celebi used Pain Split, which surprised me as Celebi didn't even have that attack in the first place. Now Celebi and Pikachu have about 150 HP. Pikachu used Mean Look. Not like that did anything. As expected, due to the effects of Parasong, my Celebi fainted. Except in the text it said, Celebi has died. Instead of the ordinary drop off the screen animation, the Celebi back sprite just vanished. For some reason, the Pikachu was still up, even with the Parasong, and it didn't count as my loss. Pikachu used one more different attack beyond the 5 attack limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards, it said Pikachu has died. With a slow fade out animation, apparently I was a winner, as a transparent red sprite showed up and said. At that point, I just freaked out, as the transparent red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his transparent body. The body then ended at that point and faded out along with the music. I'm back in Overworld with another change to the gold sprite. He is now as transparent as Fred's Overworld sprite. I quickly checked Gold's profile where this time the only thing remains of him is his head, with a transparent skin. The head was zoomed in a bit, showing a black void in his eyes. It now stated that he now has 40 badges. I then backed out and checked my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknown, which then spelled out in red, no more. I was at what I now know is next to the end. There was apparently no music playing, but for some reason I still felt like something was there that could be heard. I went into my back room in New Barktown. Maybe finally I get to play this game properly, but who am I kidding? I knew that sadistic fuck must have done something. I walked around my room to interact with things, as I am a bit afraid to go down the stairs to see what was waiting down there. Note, I said walked, as while the background was moving, Gold was not moving his translucent limbs at all while doing so, just floating like those ghosts you see in Diamond and Pearl. As expected, the radio computer and TV did not work, so I had no choice but to go down the stairs. I ended up in the same lower level room of my house. Everything appears normal except Mom isn't home. After failing to interact with everything in this room, I decided to go outside. To my surprise, that door leading outside at the south didn't work, and instead I just walked straight through it to a void. I continued moving south to see what the fuck was going on. My house vanishes as I head south into the void. It was creepy as when I entered the void, the outline on Gold's transparent sprite turned white to contrast with the pitch black. Eventually, I reached a white area and Gold's sprite turned black and transparent again. Continued south without thinking of stopping at all. After a long trek south, I finally encountered something. It was Gold's original sprite. I talked to it. He said, "Goodbye forever," and vanished. As that happened, it said, question mark, question mark, question mark, used nightmare. Which at this point, I would not deny that being possible. Gold did another escape rope animation, spinning slowly downwards like before. I'm back. I'm now back into the small, hollowed out room, surrounded by graves earlier, or at least I say I was back there, as there was no sprite anymore. I tried to walk around, but nothing moved. Not even wall bumping noise. I checked my trainer profile with absolutely no gold sprite left. It said I have zero badges, and all pictures of the Johto gym leaders at the bottom were replaced with skulls. I checked my Pokemon, which were all level 25 unknown. As expected, it spelled out a phrase that I dared to read. I'm dead. As soon as I went back to the overworld, the room I supposedly was in was then covered with the same blocks as the walls. I then figured out what exactly that room was when the final text was said, R.I.P. The room was a big grave surrounded by other graves. Gold has already been dead. He died presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a younger trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempts at becoming a Pokemon Master, was still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death, and his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation. Same, I was unable to escape from that text no matter what I pressed. I tried resetting the game, and the same thing happened, at which I then finally decided to give up on that horrible nightmare. After that experience, I'll never look at the gimmick unknown the same way again. They say that only the first generation have folk tales and legends, but the second generation have shown me how unpleasant the truth can be. I eventually enjoyed Soul Silver immensely, but I still can't unthink what that rigged game has told me. And that's it.
That story is the same as I remember it before.
Yep. That's Pokemon Lost Silver.
Oh, I didn't remember the name, but I remembered the story. Oh
Yep.
man, why was that removed?
Hell if I know.
It's actually a good story. That's one of the more popular Pokemon creepypastas.
Yeah. How I found it is within the Creepypasta Historical Archive. So this is archived, thankfully. So yeah, that's Pokemon Lost Silver.
Very dark.
Yep.
On to another dark story?
Yeah, just give me a moment.
Alright.
Alright. Yep. The next Pokemon Creepypasta Disabled. You ready?
Yeah.
Alright. In 3, 2, 1. Disabled. When it comes to Pokemon, my favorites have to be Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff. When I was a little girl, I dreamed of having a puffy Jigglypuff. I even used to have a bunch of Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff plushies. They would surround my pillow, and each night I would cuddle with a different one, just to make sure they each got some love. Anytime my Jigglypuff or Wigglytuff used sing, I would hum the little tune with them, thinking it made my chances better for the opposing Pokemon to fall asleep. I was very naive back then, but it was a blissful innocence, to be honest. Hell, I even played Jigglypuff in the Brawl games. I didn't care if anybody else didn't like her. I did. So when I got my hands on Pokemon Soul Silver when it first came out, I, of course, made it my mini mission to find a Jigglypuff and a Wigglytuff. I went through the game waiting for Puffs and Tuffs to show up. I encountered the occasional trainer with a Puff or Tuff, but I soon found out that Jigglypuffs could only be caught in one set area, which I later found to be the game's Safari Zone, and Wigglytuffs could not be found in the wild at all for me. At that point, Safari Zone was not active for me, so I was stuck waiting a little while longer to capture my beloved Puff. After a week or so of battling and schoolwork, Safari Zone was finally available. I went there once I had a chance to go and went on a hunt for Jigglypuff, and of course, it was not easy. I ran into maybe 8 the first trip and lost all 8 of them. I remember calling my DS Lite a cheater. Next day, though, I finally caught my first Jigglypuff. I happily named her June and put her in my party ASAP. It took some time to get her up to level with the rest of my team, but well worth it for me. I even kept her sing since I felt so nostalgic to hear that lovely tune again. Sadly, school got busy for me for a while, so I was forced to put my game on hold. But once I got my free time back, I went right back to work, making sure all my Pokemon loved me, especially my June. But I still didn't have my Wigglytuff. I didn't want to lose June, so I thought about getting an already evolved Wigglytuff. Since Firestone has proven its dislike of me, so I set a call out on a wireless trade asking for a Wigglytuff, any gender and any level. I wasn't picky at the time, but now I wish I had been picky. In exchange for a new Wigglytuff, I put out a wonderfully bred Totodile that had some killer moves, even for a level 6. Waited hours thinking someone would see the quality right away and send a trade. I waited days, maybe someone would just happen to want a Totodile to raise. Nearly 2 weeks had passed, and I still had no response. I had already given up hope and was ready to use a Moonstone on June. I ended up checking one last time to make sure, and I wanted to get my Totodile back somehow, if no one was going to take him. But it didn't send me to the main menu for wireless trade. Instead, I got the dramatic evolving music, and a Pokeball came flying from the top screen to the bottom. Finally, I got my Wigglytuff. I quickly logged out to see. Sorry. I quickly logged out to see my new friend, a female Wigglytuff, level 26. The name was a bit odd though. Disabled. In all caps, I didn't get why someone would name a Wigglytuff that. But I had even stranger names for Pokemon. I just wished I could have changed it. For some reason, you can never change the name of a traded Pokemon. Its information was a bit odd, but I was never one for those kinds of details or learning the meanings behind those details. Gloomy nature, and it only knew one move, sing. I didn't recall ever seeing Gloomy before, but I had seen timid, so I figured if they can be shy, they can be sad too. Uh, though you would have to wonder what Pokemon would be Gloomy. And the fact it only knew Sing did bug me. It would have been nice if his previous trainer left for some more moves, but I had some nice TMs to try on it anyway. Despite the off information, I was eager to try out the Wigglytuff in battle. I checked my character's bag and picked the best TM I was almost sure would work. I ended up picking Hidden Power, Swagger, and Explosion. I headed over to the nearest patch of grass and walked around aimlessly looking for a fight. The battle music came on and the Pokemon was a Ponyta. I picked Fight and used Sing, just to make Wigglytuff's first fight was easy. It failed. Well, I knew Sing didn't always work, so I didn't think anything of it. Ponyta used Tail Whip. It was cute, but it only lowered my defense. My turn again, so I used Hidden Power, just to see if I was in the right place for it. I wasn't, since I barely made a nick in Ponyta's HP. I used Tail Whip again, so I figured that the game was using the same trick to lower the level Pokemon used. This time I tried Sing again. The screen acted like it had used Sing, but there was no sound. Sing was disabled. I stared at my screen. How was it Sing unusable? Was it a stupid trick? I let Ponyta use the tail whip again, but then Wigglytuff shook a bit like it was suffering from an effect. I thought I saw the sprite change, but then I realized that I probably got a glitchy Pokemon. I cussed a pit, pissed that I lost a good Pokemon for a hacked one. I didn't want this one messing with my game, so I picked Run. Disabled wants to fight. You could not leave the battle. Come on, I remember saying out loud. I kept thinking that it was probably about to ruin my game. I thought Ponyta was about to attack this turn, but it didn't. Its little sprite shook like it was poisoned. Ponyta was frozen in fear. It might not attack. I knew this was getting too weird. I tried to pick Run again, but another weird text came up. Disabled wants to fight. You cannot leave the battle. I didn't even see that text was different this time. I was able to pick another option. I couldn't run, so I fought. I tried Hidden Power again. Hidden Power was disabled. I had to pick another one. I tried Swagger. Swagger was disabled. I was doing this to its moves. All these questions popped up in my head, one after another. What did that guy who gave me this Wigglytuff do? I had to escape. I can't keep this Pokemon. I knew I could just turn the game off, but I wanted to see what was happening. I wanted to see what was wrong with my Wigglytuff. I was stuck with only two options, Sing and Explosion. Sing was already disabled from past attempts, so I could only use Explosion. The move would take out the Wigglytuff and the Ponyta too, ending the battle. I thought that maybe it was a good thing. Explosion was disabled. I didn't have a chance to react before the next team up. Sorry. I didn't even have a chance to react before more text came up. Disabled tried using Sing. Sing was disabled. It was doing it on its own. Sprite started shaking a bit more than before, more obviously. Ponyta is frozen in fear. It can no longer escape from battle. I felt my heart start to pound. Maybe this is what Ponyta was feeling at the time. Disabled tried using Sing. Sing was disabled. 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 Each time the text passed, Wigglytuff's sprite turned darker and darker. Disabled used struggle. I watched in horror as the Wigglytuff used struggle like it had no other moves to use. Most of the time, it didn't even hit Ponyta, just Wigglytuff, like it was hurting itself. The Ponyta finally fled from the battle. The sequence ended. I wish I could have gone with it, since Wigglytuff was first in my party. It was walking along with me on screen. Its colors looked dirty and red. Could be seen on it. I turned my character to talk to it. Dot, dot, dot. It didn't say anything to me. I tried again, being strangely desperate to figure out what was happening to the Wigglytuff. I was so joyed to finally have. Dot, dot, dot. I just wanted to sing. I wasn't sure who was talking. Maybe it was a voiceover. I thought. I talked to it again. Why? Why can't I sing? Just sing. Sing. Each time I spoke to it, its cry grew softer and softer, like it was a toy breaking. I began to feel bad for Wigglytuff and headed back for the city to heal it. It was the least I could do before I turned my game off, taking it back to the time when I just barely got it, before I used it. Sadly, we didn't get far. We encountered another Pokemon battle, another Ponyta. I picked Run, but just like last time. Disabled wants to fight. You cannot escape the battle. No one had time to react to what happened during this fight. Ponyta was too slow for some reason, and was stuck in battle. The options menu did not come up for me. Disabled tried to use Sing. 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 There was so much text, it moved off the box itself. It was finally glitching out, I thought. Disabled Hughes struggled. It struggled, and 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 struggled. Each struggle, Wigglytuff took more and more damage. Though this time the wild Ponyta got hit more this time too. The wild Ponyta fled. I thought the fight was over, but the battle screen stayed up. I began mashing the buttons, thinking maybe it was going to talk again and I needed to press A or B. The screen faded and changed to the involvement screen. I couldn't speak, my heart sank, and I felt my eyes water. The once normal Wigglytuff sprite was faded. Its left ear was torn off, and a red pixel covering its broken end. Its tired eyes were pitch black, with only a red dot to show its pupils. Even its mouth had red coming from it, like blood was dripping out. Why can't I sing? Why? Why? Can you sing? Yes or no? I I picked no. I just wanted this to end. You're lying. You can sing. Give me your sing. Yes or no? I hit no about 4 or 5 times. Sing, sing, sing. The speaker sounded on a high-pitched screech, making me drop my DS to get away. I ran out of my room and called a friend. I didn't touch the game after that. A friend came over seeing as I could not hide the panic I was feeling. She laughed at me, but I told her I wasn't touching the game. She picked it up for me and looked at it, shaking her head as she turned it off and closed it. She handed it back to me. I think you broke it, she told me, leaving my room and heading for the living room. She stayed with me the rest of the day and night. I couldn't get that image out of my head. The next morning, with my friend sitting next to me, I put the Wigglytuff up for trade. I found someone that was offering a Cyndaquil in exchange for a Wigglytuff. I hit the button as hard as I could, wanting it to hurry up. The trade went through. I still have that Cyndaquil. Whoever had him named him Hurry. And that's it for Disabled.
Thank you, I hate it. As in, it's a good story, but damn.
You like how it connected the previous one?
Yeah. Also, I think I get why it was removed from the wiki. It's not problematic, but it's probably a little too scary for some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom very quick.
Alright. Is anyone in chat? Or am I alone? If I'm alone, it means I can break all the rules I want. I can also say the word penis as much as I want to. There's no one to stop me. There's no one to stop me in my hunt for saying the word penis.
Did, did you wait for me?
Yeah, sorry.
Why are you apologizing?
I don't know. Anyways, we ready?
Yeah.
Alright. Come follow me. During the first few days of the release of Pokemon Red and Green in Japan, back in February 27th, 1996, a peak of deaths appeared in the age group of 10 to 15. The children were usually found dead through suicide, usually by hanging or jumping from heights. However, some were more odd. A few cases recorded children who had been sawing off their limbs, others sticking their faces inside the oven and choking themselves on their own fists, shoving their own arms down their throat. The few children who were saved before killing themselves showed sporadic behavior. When asked why they were going to hurt themselves, they only answered in chaotic screams and scratched at their own eyes. When showed what seemed to be the connection to this attitude, the Game Boy, they had no response. But when combined with either Pokemon Red or Green, the screams would continue, and they would do their best to leave the room it was located in. This confirmed the authorities' suspicion that the games somehow had a connection to these children and the deaths. It was a strange case because many children who had the same games did not show this behavior, but only a few. The police had no choice but to pursue this, since they had no other leads. Collecting all the cartridges these children had purchased, they kept them sealed away as strong evidence to look over later. They decided the first thing to do was talk to the programmers themselves. First person they met was the director of the original games, Satoshi Tajiri. When told about the deaths surrounding his games, he seemed slightly uneasy but admitted nothing. He led them to the main programmer of the game, the people responsible for the actual content. The detectives met Takanori Ota, one of the main programmers of the game. Unlike Satoshi, he did not seem uneasy, but very kept, explaining that it was impossible to use something like a game to cause such deaths, and also bringing up the point that not all children were affected. He brushed it off as some kind of odd coincidence or mass hysteria. It seemed like he was hiding something, but wasn't giving away. Finally, he did say something interesting. Takanori had heard a rumor going around that the music for Lavender Town, one of the locations in the game, had caused some children to go ill. It was only a rumor and had no real definite backup, but it was still something to look into. He directed the detectives to Junichi Masuda, the music composer of the series. Masuda had also heard of these rumors, but again said they had no evidence that his music was the cause. Even to prove a point, he played the exact song from the game and quickly through with no effects to anyone. The detectives nor Masuda himself feeling anything different or odd, although they still had their suspicions of Masuda and the music of Lavender Town. It seemed they had reached another dead end. Going back to the cartridges they had seized from the homes of the children, they decided to take a slightly more direct look at the games. They knew it was these games that gave the children the ill effects, so they took extreme caution. Popping in the cartridge and turning the console on, the game screen booted. The title screen appeared, and an option to continue or create a new game appeared. When I chose to continue the game, the stats of the game appeared. I saw the names of the children who had played, usually Red, or another simple name. However, the interesting thing was the time displayed and the number of Pokemon they owned. On every game, the time was very low, and all of them had only a single Pokemon in their inventory. And it came to a stunning reality that it could not have been the music from Lavender Town that had caused such ill effects in the children, since it was possible to reach that part of the game in such a small amount of time, and with only one Pokemon in their inventory. This brought him to the conclusion that something early on in the game had to be the cause. If it wasn't the music, nor the title screen, it had to be something within the first few minutes of the game itself. They had no choice but to turn off the game now and go back to the programmers, asking for a list of all programmers from Takanori, and they found surprisingly that one of the programmers had committed suicide shortly after the game was released. His name was Chiro Mura, a very obscure programmer who had provided very little for the game. Even more interesting, he had requested his name to not appear in the credits of the game, and so it was not. Looking over the evidence found at Chiro's apartment, they found many notes written in bold marker. Most of it was crumbled or marked out, making it very difficult to read. The very few words they could find in the mess was, "Do not enter, watch out, and come follow me," in bold. The detectives were unsure what these meant, but knew they had to have a connection. Further searching, they discovered Chiro was good friends with one of the map designers, Koji Sino, and was probably the only reason Chiro had given part in making the game. Koji Nishino, since the release of the game, had locked himself in his apartment, barely leaving the dark of night to fetch anything he might need. He told his friends and family he was mourning for his dear friend Chiro, but they did not believe this. Since Nishino had locked himself up the day the game was put in stores, a few days before Chiro had killed himself. It was troubling, but the authorities finally persuaded Nishino to sit down and speak with them. He looked as if he hadn't slept in days, dark rings under his eyes. He stunk. His nails had grown black and his hair was greasy, sticking to his forehead and neck. He spoke in stutters and murmurs, but at least he had something to say. When asked if he knew anything about the children who had died after exposure of the game and if it had any connection to the game, he answered them seemingly carefully, choosing his words thoughtfully before answering. He told them that his friend Chiro had an interesting idea with the game, something he had wanted to try since he heard the project was starting. Nishino himself knew Takanori, the director and main programmer, for a long time, so he could easily get a mediocre programmer in on the project with a little persuasion. It seemed Chiro had convinced Nishino to get him in on the project, and it had worked. The detectives knew they were onto something. This unknown, obscure programmer, Chiro, had to have something to do with it. Something. They asked what Chiro's idea was, why he wanted so badly to have part in making this children's game. Nishino told them that Chiro never told him much about it, other than a few details every now and then. He wanted to insert a special Pokemon in the game, one completely different from all the others. It would serve as an extra, a kind of out-of-place thrill for the player. It wasn't, however, missing. No. It couldn't be. With the gameplay time recorded on the cartridges, it was impossible for the children to have time to meet that Pokemon. Nishino, throughout the entire conversation, seemed to break down even more with every question. Detectives pushed him more and more, searching through his mind for any and every scrap of knowledge. This man had no game in Chiro's intentions. It was when they asked about the notes found in Chiro's home that he snapped. From under the couch Nishino was sitting on, he whipped out a pistol, pointing it straight to the police while backing away a few steps. Then just as quickly, he brought the pistol to his face. "Don't follow me," muttered Nishino as he struck the pistol in his mouth and pulled the trigger. It was too quick for the police to react. It was done. Nishino had killed himself, repeating slightly differently what was written on one of Chiro's papers. It seemed all leads had finally died. The team who had created this original game were splitting up, becoming harder to find. It was as if they were keeping a secret. When the police finally managed to talk with anyone who had parts in the game, even the obscure character designers or monster designers, it seemed they had nothing of interest to say. Most of them didn't even know Chiro, and the few who did only seen him once or twice working on the game himself. Throughout all of this, the only confirmation they had was that Chiro was indeed the one who had worked on the very early parts of the game. It had been a couple months after original children's suicides and death rate had dropped dramatically. It seemed that the game was no longer giving any ill effects to any children. The callback of the games that was planned was cancelled, since it seemed the game was no longer harming any children. They had begun to think that maybe Takanori was right, and it was all just a very odd coincidence or mass hysteria until they received the letter. It was given to one of the detectives himself, quite directly out of the street. It was a woman who gave him the note. A very frail, thin, sick-looking thing. She gave him the letter quickly, telling him it was something he needed to see. Without waiting for a response or another word, she disappeared into the crowd. The detective brought it to his office, and calling the others in, we brought it out and read it aloud. It was a letter written by Chiro himself, but it wasn't one found at his apartment. They had thoroughly searched and cleared out the place, so wherever this letter had come from, it wasn't kept at his home. It was signed to be given to Nicino. It started off quite formal. A hello, how are you, regards to family and such. After one or two of these normal paragraphs, they reached a section that requested Nicino to get him into the game team, get him a programming position in Pokemon Red and Green. His letter continued, the handwriting seemed to grow more jittery. He talked about a glorious idea he had, a way to program something unseen in any game before. He said it would certainly revolutionize not only the gaming industry, but everyone. He went on to say that it was a very simple procedure to program this idea into the game. He did not even have to add any foreign programming, but could use what was already given in the game itself. This would, the detectives agreed, make it impossible to notice any obscurities in the programming itself. It was the perfect way to hide whatever this was. The letter ended abruptly. There was no goodbye, no say hi to the family, no write back or thank you. Nothing like that. It was just his name written hard in a letter where the paper almost broke through. It was only his name, Chiro Mira. This was a nail in the coffin for the detectives. They had no more suspicion about the cause. Chiro had programmed something into the early parts of the game, something maddening. To further increase the streak of success, they discovered that the programming team had worked in pairs, even Chiro himself. He had worked with another programmer, Sasuke Tamada. If anyone knew what the secret in this game was, Sasuke Tamada would be the man. This was their final hope of unraveling this mystery once and for all. They learned Sasuke had provided a lot of programming to the game and seemed to be an average good guy and worker. They were easily allowed into his home, a fair place, and they entered his living room where they sat. Sasuke did not sit, however. He stood by the window on a second-story floor, looking out onto the busy street. He was smiling a little. There's no direct witnesses to the events that followed. The only thing from the conversation that remained was found on a voice recorder, sitting on a table in front of the two detectives, assigned to talk to Sasuke. What follows is the unedited recording. Sasuke Tamada, what part did you have in these games Pokemon Red and Green? Asked the first detective. I was a programmer. His voice was light and friendly, almost too friendly. That's all. Am I right in knowing that the programmers working on the game worked in teams? Asked the detective. One could hear the voice of feet moving on the floor slightly. You would be right, said Sasuke after a moment of silence. And her partner, his name was... The detective was quickly cut off by Sasuke's eerie voice. Chiro Mira. That was his name. Chiro Mira. Another silence. It seemed the detectives were a little uneasy about this man. Could you tell us if Mira ever acted strange at all? Any particular behaviors you observed while working with him at all? Sasuke answered him. I don't know him that well. Really. We didn't meet up frequently, only every once in a while to trade data, or when the entire group was called for a meeting. That's the only times I really ever saw him. They acted normal, as far as I could tell. He was a short man, and I think this affected his consciousness. He acted weaker than any other man I met. He was willing to do a lot of work to gain recognition. This I do know, I think. Silence. Yes? Acted detective, pushing for him to continue. You think what? I think he was a very weak man. I think he wanted to prove himself regardless of this point. I think he wanted to make himself known for something special. Something that would make people forget about the way he looked and paid attention to the powerful mind that lay inside his skull. Unfortunately for him, however, he didn't have much of a mind to back up that reasoning. Why do you say that? Asked the second detective. Well, it's the simple truth, answered Sasuke quickly. His feet could be heard moving across the tile floor. He was nothing special, even if he wanted to believe so. You can't become greatness even if you believe it. It's impossible. Somehow, I think Chiro knew this himself, somewhere deep in there. He knew it. The detectives went silent again, not sure how to steer the conversation. After a moment, they continued. Can you tell us what Chiro's part of the game was? What did he work on exactly? Sasuke answered more quickly than before. Nothing. Nothing important. He worked on some obscure parts of the beginning of the game. Pause, and a little more information. It was Oak's parts to be exact. He worked on some of Oak's parts. When he's seen first, you see. What else? Pushed the police. They could hear it in Sasuke's voice. He knew something. We know you know about the children and the deaths. We know it was Chiro who did it. He programmed something in the game. What are you implying? Asked Sasuke. Sounded like he was trying to maintain his voice. We're implying that since you're his partner, if you're hiding something from us, then you could just as much be responsible for those children's deaths as Chiro is himself. You can't prove anything, Sasuke shouted. Tell us what Chiro did to the game. They shouted back. What? I told him to. Silence. Complete silence. You know what, huh? Asked Sasuke, finally breaking the eerie silence, but replacing it with his voice. You want to know what this is all about? Chiro is an idiot. He'd do anything for a bit of attention, anything at all. He couldn't program worth a shit either. The one thing he could do, however, was be manipulated. You could tell him what to do, and he would do it. He wouldn't even question it. He'd do it. Just to hear that thank you when you received the finished product. That was his reasons. That's all he wanted. 2 clicks from the detective's guns could be heard. I could control his flawlessly. I could control him flawlessly. He's a lot like Takanori. Of course, none of you knew this, but I was the one who brought up the idea of the game, the idea of the entire operation. I just told the fellow what to do, and he followed me without a doubt. He knows nothing, just like Chiro. A sound of window opening could be heard, followed by the detectives. Don't move or we'll shoot. Let me tell you about a mechanic in the game, continued Sasuke. His voice was more rushed, but it still held that slyness. Consider it a hint, okay? If you walk around the grassy areas enough, a Pokemon will appear, and you'll have to have the chance to go into battle with it. It's a necessary part of the game overall, you see. Step away from the window. We won't warn you again. At the start of the game, you have to walk into the grassy area before Oak appears, and you receive your first Pokemon. Understand me? Under normal circumstances, it was programmed that even though you're in a grassy area, no Pokemon will spawn. I made it different. I manipulated that Chiro told him what to put in the program. I gave him all the instructions on how to do it. And he did it flawlessly. It's rare, but it can happen. Stepping into the grass, one can spawn. Sasuke, we don't want to shoot. Shoot me? Asked Sasuke, laughing at the same time. Shoot me? You're as dumb as Chiro was. Once he found out the truth, he had to end it. It was his fault after all. He shot himself because of it. If you're so determined to finish that case of yours, if you want to know, play the damn game for yourself. Roll the wheel, and who knows, maybe you'll learn the secret for yourself. A shot could be heard, loud enough to distort the audio. Sounds of screaming, murmuring could be heard. The table, the recorder, was on crash. Ear-shattering distortions, silence, then laughing. Sasuke was laughing. And then words. Come follow me. Come follow me. And then nothing. The recorder continued to record until the tape ran out. There was nothing else on it. The police arrived on the scene quickly. And to their horror, they discovered Sasuke and the two detectives dead. They had all been shot, but not after struggling. The detectives have been shot multiple times, at least 10 each, before dying after being shot in between their eyes. Sasuke himself had clearly died of 2 shots to his chest, straight through the heart. This game was causing a massacre. At least 100 children were dead. Sino, the unsuspecting friend, dead. Chiro had Chiro, the manipulated toy, dead. The 2 detectives, dead. And now even the creator, the cause of this atrocity, Sasuke, dead. The game was stretching far over its original intentions. It was killing anyone and everyone who got involved. The lead detective had decided to put this case away. The man who committed the crimes was dead, so there was no longer any reason to continue the case. All evidence, all the cartridges, all the notes, all the letters, they were locked away, kept in the darkness where they belong. There were talks about the entire thing, small conversations every now and then, but over the years, even these began to fade away. Eventually, the case was only a memory in the minds of those who experienced it firsthand. 10 years passed. February 27th, 2006 was the date. The lead detective, the man who locked away the original evidence 10 years previous, was reminded of the awful event that occurred. Although he was no longer in force, he still had access to files, and was helped when he could. The reminder of the event caused him to look back and open a sealed container that contained all the evidence collected. He read through the letters and the notes, and remembered the woman who had appeared to him on the street that one day and handed him the letter, and that led to the change of the entire case. He wondered who she was and where she had come from. Perhaps he was Chiro's mother, or maybe Sasuke's. It was far too late to pursue any of this. Far too late. Seeing the container again, he saw a second one directly behind it, pulling it out and read the note on top of it. Evidence number 2104A. He opened it up and looked inside. Filling a container were exactly 104 Pokemon Red and Green cartridges, each one in perfect condition, untouched since the day they had last checked them 10 years ago. He reached in and pulled one out. Pokemon Red. He hadn't seen one in a long time. He didn't know what he thought next, but he reached in his decks and pulled out an old Game Boy. He received it a long time ago, but it still worked. It was his son's. But he died a few years ago. His wife was gone too. That was then, though. Popping in the cartridge in the back of the Game Boy, he turned on the system. The title screen. Then the option to continue or start a new game. Tanaka. That was his child's name. The one who played it first. He was probably dead along with all the others. He pressed new game and started a new game. It was normal, average. He walked around, talked to his mother, went outside. He started walking towards the grass. In his head, he could hear Sasuke's words. Even though he was not there, even though he had never seen a man in his life, he could still see him, hear him. Come follow me. It was getting closer and closer, only a step or two away. Roll the wheel and who knows? Maybe you'll learn the secret for yourself. He entered the grass. The screen did nothing at first. Nothing at all. Just sat there, and so did the detective, completely frozen, as if time had stopped just for them. The screen went black, and then lit up again. The iconic green background with black text appearing. The detective's weary eyes grew wide. He couldn't help but read out what was there in front of him. Come follow me. Come follow me. Come follow me. I miss you, Dad. I miss you, my husband. I miss you so much. Tears formed in his eyes, falling down his cheeks. Screens and screens of text appeared. He rapidly clicked the A button to continue it. It was his wife and his child. They were speaking to him, calling to him, crying with him. They wanted to see him. They loved him. He loved them. I love you too, muttered the man in a hoarse, scratching voice. Come follow me. Come new again. We want to see you and hold you and be with you forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Don't stay away. You can see us too. We miss you. Come follow me. We love you. The black screen. The detective's eyes grew wide, his jaw dropping. Screen lit back up, and Oak was leading him out of the grass. Come follow me, said Oak. No! Shouted the man, dropping the game onto the floor. He quickly fell forward, reaching for it, bringing the screen back to his face. Bring them back! Bring them back to me! The game continued on as usual, not responding to the detective at all. My wife, my child. Listen to me. Bring them back to me, I said. Voices. He heard voices. Hundreds of voices. He turned around from his seat, looking behind him. And standing in his small room were children. Many children. Some had no eyes. Some had rings around their throats. Some were burned all across their body. They were screaming, reaching towards him. Bring mommy back. Bring my daddy back. Bring back my pet. And they all screamed out, reaching for the game, their mouths agape with horror and pain. I don't want them to go away. Bring them back to me. Bring them back to me. No, shouted the detective. It's mine. My family is here. Don't touch it. Horror was across his face. Come follow me, said a voice. The lead detective looked over in the corner of his room next to an old desk was Sasuke. He stood in the corner, tall, handsome, clean. A smile was on his face, stretching across his. Come follow me. The detective jumped up, stepping back, trying to force away the children crawling towards him. Reaching out for the game held tightly within his hands. What's going on here? What's going on? Where is my family? Sasuke smiled generously. I'll show you. I'll help you get away from them. You see? Just follow me. Sasuke reached down and opened a drawer on the old desk. The lead detective, pushing through the crowd of children, trying to get away, looked inside. Sitting there, covered with dust, was his old gun from when he was on the force. He had not used that gun in many years and had put it away, not wanting to remember the things he had to do with it. But right now, he didn't see it as something that caused pain or that killed. It was a shining. It was a light. It was something that could set him free. Just follow me, said Sasuke, picking up the gun and putting it in the lead detective's hand. He formed his hand to hold the gun, then brought it up to his temple. Just pull the trigger. That's all. The lead detective turned around. The children were crawling at him, grabbing his legs and pulling at him. They reached for the game. He turned back towards Sasuke and smiled. My family. I'll follow you. He pulled the trigger. Bang. His brain spread the wall as he fell to the ground, dead. It was a few days before the body was discovered. It lay on the floor, blood everywhere. In one hand held an empty gun, and the other was a classic Game Boy with Pokemon Red on the back. The battery had long died, and only an empty black screen was left. And this was the final murder that the remaining authorities would allow. The last detective who was ever a part of this case personally carried all 104 cartridges away and burned them all, making sure not a single one survived. They would taunt no more. However, this is not the end of the story. The code was said to have survived and was even passed onto other languages of the games. If you have an old Pokemon game, you can replace the cartridge in the back of the classic Game Boy, turn on the system, and roll the wheel. Who knows? Maybe you'll learn the secret for yourself. And that's it.
Thank you.
What do you think about it?
It's good.
That was Come Follow Me. The, the, the story that predated Lavender Town Syndrome.
I think I like that more than Lavender Town, honestly.
Yeah. It might have been kicked off because it talks about the suicide a bit too much.
Uh, for something like creepy pastas, don't aren't a lot of stories on there that aren't removed things that talk about suicide a lot.
Yeah, then I don't know why it was kicked. Because it's pretty good.
I don't know why either, but I will say there are lots of approved creepy pastas that are basically practically all suicide.
Yeah. Now, there's a reason I'm showing this. It's because the next game, not next game, next story is actually Lavender Town Syndrome.
Uh,
And yes, everyone's going to hear the music.
nice.
All right, we all ready? Jerry?
Yes.
All right.
And again, I think we're the only two here. I think everyone else fell asleep waiting for you to start.
Yeah, fuck narcolepsy.
I'm sorry.
It's fine. Anyway, 3, 2, 1. Lavender Town Syndrome. The Lavender Town Syndrome was a peak in suicides and illnesses of children between the ages of 7 and 12 shortly after the release of Pokemon Red and Green in Japan back in February 27th, 1996. Rumors say that these suicides and illnesses only occurred after the children playing the game reached Lavender Town, whose theme music had extremely high frequencies that studies showed that only children and young teens can hear, since their ears are more sensitive. Due to the Lavender Tone, at least 200 children supposedly committed suicide, and many more developed illnesses and afflictions. The children who committed suicide usually did so by hanging or jumping from heights. Those who did not act irrationally complained of severe headaches after listening to Lavender Town's theme. Although Lavender Town now sounds differently depending on the game, this mass hysteria was caused by the first Pokemon game release. After the Lavender Town incident, the programmers had fixed Lavender Town's theme music to be at a lower frequency, since the children were no longer affected by it. One video appeared in 2010 using special software to analyze the audio of Lavender Town's music. When played, the software created images of the unknown near the end of the audio. This raised a controversy since the unknown did not appear until Generation 2 games, Silver, Gold, and Crystal. The unknown translate to leave now. There's also said to be a beta version of Lavender Town. Said that the beta version Pocket Monsters was released to some kids to test the games. This is what. Oh wait, this is not the music? It's a beta version of Lavender Town. Oh, no, it is music. It's not moving.
I hear. right?
Hmm?
I think the song has looped a few times at this point.
Okay.
Sorry, it's just it may be long, but it's a looping long.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why I listened for like over 4 minutes to just the song.
Alright. So I might as well just cut that off.
Where?
Hmm?
Got what off?
That Discord thing.
Oh, fair point.
So I had that open to, have you be able to listen.
Thank you.
Now, these next two stories I've never read before, but I heard great things from them.
Hmm. Which one you gonna read next?
Hellbell.
Hmm. I have no idea what that's about.
Same. We ready?
Yep.
Alright, 3, 2, 1. Hellbell. After the fourth generation of Pokemon disappointed him so much, my brother tossed me all of his Pokemon stuff in disgust. I received hundreds of cards to add to my collection. The Blastoise plush he won at King's Island 9 years ago, and a diamond game that completely swept away his love for the game and all things associated with it. That chapter of his life came to a sad close, while mine just gained something to continue on. Admittedly, the games that had come out for the DS disappointed me as well. There was just something about it all that made the magic of the games normally held face away a little. As a person who grew up with the originals, Generation 4 simply wasn't my Pokemon game anymore. Regardless, I wasn't going to turn my back on something that accompanied me through childhood simply because the game disappointed me a little. In fact, I wanted Diamond. Dialga was 100 times better looking than Palkia, and I rather enjoyed the thought of finally getting to be the one to catch it this time around, instead of having to hack one or trade for it. Before I continue, I must tell you that this doesn't involve Dialga at all. I just like it and originally wanted Diamond, but had to settle for Pearl because my brother got to it first. This does start off with legendary Pokemon, however, though I'm certain that if I'd used any other, outcome would have been the same. This happening seemed to be meant for me. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have happened at all, which I would have been completely fine with. I started up his save game just to see what all he had. His save information said that he had all the Pokemon in his decks, even the ones that had yet to be released through wireless events, which reminded me that he really enjoyed using action replay codes to enhance his gaming experience. That was probably the only thing that caused him to keep the game for as long as he did. But even cheating gets old after a while. After starting his game, I checked his party. He has 6 shiny level 100 Rayquazas. Like all the other Pokemon he owned, he caught them using the lengthy Encounter Any Pokemon code, where you had to discard heart scales to indicate which Pokemon you wanted to catch at level 100. When a Pokemon encountered with this code were about as weak as you had given them a large number of rare candy. I still recall losing to these six frequently. I had used this code myself throughout my first playthrough of Pearl, and I traded these across the net to increase my chances of winning at the lottery. Or at least that's what I did before a friend scolded me and I was more or less forced to start over cheat free. While he needed no Pokemon to complete his Pokedex, he didn't need to win any extra items. Trading was only a fun experience for me, just to see where they come from. So I went to Juve City, to the Global Trading Center, to see what I can get for one of these Rayquazas. I know I could have traded anything, but I secretly held a grudge against these six for beating me so badly all these times. Once in the trading network, I offered one up for a Bronzong that I picked at a random out of the first list. Of course, I couldn't choose a gender, but I chose the required level to be 100, just to make it more or less even trade. After that, I left for a little while. After doing nothing of particular interest for about 6 hours, came back to see if I had any takers for the trade. I immediately got excited when the trade sequence started up. I know it was just a simple Bronzong, but still, I like this process a great deal. You can send me a Magikarp and I'll get excited for a little bit. You know how the process goes. I won't bother explaining actions on the screen to you. Long story short, I received a shiny Bronzong named Hellbell. I was shocked to get a shiny in return. I never got a shiny when I traded in Pearl, but the name was unsettling to me. Being a slightly religious person, I'm not comfortable speaking about anything pertaining to hell or anything like that. Even writing this makes me feel like I'm provoking a similar event to happen. Let's just hope this functions as a learning experience for you, and not something else for me. After leaving, I checked the stats. Everything was set at 666. His old trainer was named Bazelle, and it was caught at Lost Tower, but contained in a cherished ball. Clearly, it was hacked, but it's what I get for offering a hack first. The stats and other information of the Pokemon disturbed me only for the fact that I didn't like its name or information, but I assumed it was fine otherwise. Regardless, I didn't want it, so I tried offering up for trade again. This would be where I gladly accept a Magikarp, but each time I try to put it in the GTS, the game informed me that the Pokemon could not be offered in a trade. This happened to me several times before when I tried to trade hacked legendaries. I assume there's something in place that keeps people from getting truly ripped off. But I was able to trade that Rayquaza, and Bells was able to trade me Hellbell this go around. I don't know why it wouldn't allow me to offer it again. I still wanted to be rid of it, so obviously the only other option I had was to release it. Before I went to the PC, however, I checked the item it was holding. Cinder had attached mail to it, which was already fun. Even though your choices for what to say are severely limited, the letters always come out painfully cheesy. I chose Hellbell and selected to read the mail. Though the letter wasn't set up like it normally was in the game, it looked like it had actually been typed out like you used to be able to do in the Gold and Silver. The message was only 3 words long. Take me back. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. I certainly couldn't trade it again, even if I could. There was no way I could make sure Hellbell got back to Bells, so I discarded the message and went to the PC to release it. I selected the deposited Pokemon option and selected Hellbell to release it, but each time the party sprite shrunk away. It immediately came back with the message saying something along the lines of, Hellbell doesn't want to leave you. Again, this had happened before when I was clearing out my PC box in my second playthrough of Pearl. I wanted a little more room inside to release a Shinx that I had caught early on in the game, but it kept coming back. I had thought it was cute then and made the Shinx a permanent member of my party since it appeared to like me so much. But now it was just annoying. When I checked Hellbell again, it was holding another mail item, which made no sense because I had taken it away the first time. I opened it and read a slightly longer message. I can't go back on my own. Take me back. Again, I took the item and tried to release it. Another failure. When I tried to simply deposit it, the game told me to remove the mail item from the Pokemon before depositing. I know I had twice, but upon checking it again, Hellbell had yet another mail item in its possession. Lost Tower. It was finally getting more specific, which I found oddly relieving rather than a feeling of a little unease, as I probably should have been. At least I knew where I wanted to go. Maybe I'd leave my party after I took it there. I'd like to know why this Pokemon was making my game behave so strangely. Pokemon was hacked, not the game itself. As far as I know, a decent hack doesn't affect the game, and a bad hack can make it crash. But this was doing neither, more like something in between. Eager to get rid of it, I left the GTS building and stepped out into Tube Life. I was too impatient to pick an actual flying type out of the PC, so I just taught one of the clauses to move fly and chose to use it. But when I picked Solicone Town from the map, the game informed that I couldn't fly there. I knew my brother had visited the city before. I don't know why I couldn't go there, but I didn't take the time to actually think about it. I just flew the Heart home instead. I didn't waste time in Heart home. I simply left to travel through Route 209 to get to Lost Tower and hopefully rid myself of this strange Pokemon, somehow by taking it where I wanted to go. I merely noticed the lack of people on the route. Granted, I don't remember who all was there to battle and things of that sort, but I know there was at least a few there. The area there was completely vacant. The area there was completely vacant. Well, not completely. There was one person quickly pacing back and forth, where I believed that an athlete once ran that I didn't quite recognize, the sprite of a white-haired old man. Curious, I spoke to him, which was where it began to get a little weird for me. He didn't say anything that made sense, but babbled over and over for an annoyingly long amount of time, much like when you speak to a specific cyclist on a bike trail on Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. You know the one who you know the one who knows where you got your bike because the name is all over it. Ring the bell. 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 That meant nothing to me. I didn't bother speaking to him again. I just continued onto the tower. Once again, I tried to go up the stairs, but something prevented me from moving for a moment. I thought all the hacked Pokemon had finally made my game screw up, but that wasn't the case. After a moment of complete silence, a sound of a deep brazen bell began to slowly toll. After about 4 rings, the tombstone in the center of the room cracked and shattered, like someone had used rock smash on it. Beneath the tombstone was a hole. Since it wasn't allowing me to go up the stairs, I walked over and fell through it. When I landed, I fell on a platform much like the one you would find Arceus on in a Hall of Origin, only it was much darker. where the transparent platform was white and glowing for Arceus. This one was more of a blackened red. It just seemed evil rather than the holy vibe you get from the Hall of Origin. Coming from the platform was a set of wide stairs that looked as if they were made of black marble rather than white. There was no way back up, so I took the stairs and the bell continued to ring slowly. By now I was feeling incredibly uneasy, but I continued down the stairs. As I went further, it began to get foggy and a little darker. When I reached the bottom, I was met with a narrow path with large pools of magma on either side. It was, it was beginning to look more like a cave in which you encounter Groudon, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, with better graphics, of course. The path continued in a straight line for about 40 steps before hanging right on for another 40 and finally going up. The final path was long. Magma still bubbled at the side, in which each step I took, the ringing of the bell began to go faster. At least as fast as a large bell was allowed to ring, which was still just as ominous, slow tolling. Though with each ring, I couldn't help but repeat what that old man NPC had said earlier. Ring the bell. Finally, I reached the end of the pathway, which was just a small 4x4 platform, and the bell stopped ringing. I wondered what I was supposed to do here. There was nothing here to do. No way to release Hellbell, and no way to get out. I received my answer in the form of a disembodied voice. A dialogue box popped up and said, "Oh, you returned my Hellbell to me. I really appreciate it." He faded into view one space ahead in front of my sprite. It was just a simple gentleman sprite, and the party's sprite of Hellbell came out of me and stood in the space between us, facing him. And the game informed me that I had handed over Hellbell. Next, a thing popped up on the touchscreen. It looked like a part of a trainer's card where you sign your name. Again, the voice spoke. "Would you mind telling me your name, please, so that I may thank you properly?" Now this confused me. Well, everything that was happening confused me. This really threw me for a loop. First, the game should know the character name programmed into it from the start. And as far as I know, it can't actually recognize handwriting. Regardless, I began writing my brother's character's name, which was Dust. I made the first stroke. It was black ink just like normal, and made a D, but the voice stopped me. No. Your real name. Can't thank you with a false name, you know." My heart felt like it stopped for a second and sunk right into my stomach, more violently bounding back up into my chest. How the hell did the game know that I wasn't signing my real name? "Your real name, please." Again, I began writing. How was I listening to this? Watching it all play out when I could easily just turn it off or start a completely new game? I don't know. The thought simply did not cross my mind at the time. I don't think I was allowed to. The ink in which I was now writing was a bright red color, but I still wrote my full name, first and last, in the space I was provided. After I was finished, the man spoke again. "Good. Now blow, please. I don't want the ink to smudge." I blew into the mic, and ink turned from bright to deep red. I was unable to make the change after that. Afterward, the screen disappeared, and the man spoke again. "Thank you, miss. You'll be happy to know that you now belong to me. The bell tolled twice more as my sprite, currently male, turned to face me and shifted to the female sprite. Brown hair, wearing all black, just like I was at the moment. Hellbell moved forward, overlapping my sprite, and a final dialogue box popped up. Hellbell used imprisonment. After that, my DS battery died. I was shaken, I'll admit, but it just seemed like a twisted event brought about by some sort of secret within the game locked by a Pokemon. But now, I can't sleep. Food seems to turn to ash in my mouth. No water can quench my thirst, and people and animals both act as if the shadow of death is passing by them when I'm near. I'm not on my own anymore. I belong to that man, the Hellbell. I don't know what will become of that Pokemon, but if I received it, someone else is surely to do so. Use caution while using the trading system. And that's it.
I feel like the story was okay, but also like could have been scarier if the person who had originally wrote it understood uh, contracts and the mythology behind that better.
Yeah.
Because well, it like seems like it's more spooky to give no choice. In mythology, the choice is given because that's more terrifying. It's more terrifying when you think everything is okay until you realize it's not.
Yeah.
And there's always outs from the contract because that's also more scary. Will you find a way out of it, or will you be stuck with the devil contract?
Hey, Jerry.
Yeah,
Can I tell you something?
sure.
There was a time when I was trying to complete the Pokemon Ultra Moon Pokédex, and I actually did receive a Bronzong called Hellbell, but I just immediately traded it because I already had a Bronzong.
They
I had no idea it
probably
was.
named it after the story.
Yeah, obviously, if
Man,
it,
people are fanboys.
yeah, obviously, if that was the real Hellbell, I couldn't trade it.
Honestly, if it was the real Hellbell, it probably wouldn't happen that way anyway.
Yeah, and plus, if I actually, if my game started acting strangely, I would just turn off the fucking DS and play something else.
Honestly, like, if there was an actual, like, Hellbell lure or something, it'd probably be something you get in game.
Yeah.
Since they never added that for in game, it will never happen. I shrugged. Still, it was okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, ready for the final story of tonight?
Yeah.
Very. This is also another story I've never read before by the name of Strangled Red. Strangled Red.
Actually, Bright,
Yeah?
I just looked at what time it is. I think I need to leave the voice chat, get a snack, a drink, and try start winding down for bed. It's already 10:49.
Ah, so you're gonna head off?
Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. See you later, Jerry.
Good night, Bright.
Alright. Strangled Red. There are tons of stories out there about hacked Pokemon games. Some of them really quite neat, such as the one about a version where you get a ghost as a starter. Some are ridiculous, silly stories about individuals dying after playing a game, or the game talking to them. God, don't these writers know less is more when it comes to these stories? Ah, well, I digress. I grew interested in these hacked games that are apparently in any thrift store on eBay or handed out by a homeless person to random passerby. I didn't have the pleasure of meeting these creepy people. I merely found this particular cartridge in a trash bin when a garbage truck backed into my neighbor's dumpster. I noticed the game and asked the trash man if I could take it, and he didn't seem to mind. It was thrown away after all. I, of course, checked with my neighbor to confirm they actually didn't want it, though they seemed perplexed as if they'd never seen it in their life. Their son made a grab for it, a little boy who saw Charizard on the cover crying out, "Pokemon, I want mommy!" But his mother told him no, seeing as I found it. He didn't even have a Game Boy anyway. He just liked Pokemon. Thinking nothing more, I simply went home, looking at the cartridge sticker on the way. Just a plain old red version. Sticker torn slightly across the Charizard's neck. But that was expected with such an old game. I had a blue version as a kid, so I was a bit eager to see the albeit minimal differences red version had. I was rather disappointed by what I saw when the title screen showed up. Pokemon Strangled Red version. Oh damn it. It was another hack. Hacks were neat and all, but they had zero monetary value. The original is quite valuable by now, and I wanted to play Red anyway, not this crap. Oh well, it was free. Might as well as try it. The name was odd, however. Strangled Red? That made no sense. Not even in a morbid description of someone being asphyxiated. As people turn blue when choking, not red. Who knows, maybe there was a pair of these hacks, and I just got the red one. The more I thought about this, though, the more interested I became. My initial disappointment turned into curiosity. I wanted to know what the creator had made, and I was going to note everything I saw. The first oddity I noticed was the stern screen had a Charizard next to the trainer instead of a Charmander. Also, the Pokemon never cycle through the original versions. But also, the Pokemon never cycle through like the original versions did. It just stayed Charizard, even after 5 minutes of waiting. Shrugging, I hit start, noticing there was no Charizard cry as I did, like there was supposed to be. I saw there was a continue option, so I figured I'd do what everyone did with used games and see what the previous owner had done. No. At Billington's surprise, no. What do you mean by no? The game wouldn't let me continue no matter what. Though, on the fourth attempt, I heard Charizard cry quiet and barely audible, but there. Shrugging it off, I decided to just hit new game like I would have done after checking the old file anyway. Screen cut to black for a while. No Professor Oak, no starting theme, just nothing at all. Eventually, the screen came back showing a bedroom, two beds, two TVs, and a computer in the corner. My trainer sprite was the usual one, consistent with the original red version. I was curious as to why it didn't ask my name, though that was answered as I opened the pause menu, noticing my trainer was named Steven. No, this isn't my real name or some stupid crap like that. This game isn't self aware or haunted. At least, not that I know of. It just had a name chosen already. Curious, I saw he had a train starter amount of money, no badges. He didn't look like Red though. His hair was longer, almost reaching halfway down his back. Red's usual smile replaced with a confident smirk. Honestly, I found the sprite much cooler than Red. Next, I checked out his Pokemon, a single Charmander, level 5, named Miki. Nothing was odd about it, or should I say her. With the name and all, she had beginning Charmander stats. Only knew Scratch and Tail Whip, basic stuff. The game seemed relatively normal. Returning to the game, I walked around the room, noticing Steven's long hair was present at the back of my trainer's sprite. When my back was turned to the camera, I didn't recognize the house, but I descended the stairs to see more. Downstairs was another trainer who spoke to me the instant I came down. Mike. Ready yet? Steven. Yeah. I assumed this Mike was my rival, pre-decided for me. A replacement of Blue, most likely. Now I thought back to the bedroom, having two beds, realizing they weren't just rivals, they were brothers. They talked back and forth, basic Pokemon dialogue, becoming a Pokemon master, catch 'em all, stuff like that, before having a little argument over which one is better, Charmander or Squirtle, which of course led to the introduction battle, like the one versus Blue in the lab. Simple enough, scratch, tackle, till I won purely for having the first turn. I took note of how much better Steven's sprite looked in combat than Red's. A different pose, his hair looking like it was blowing in the wind. A brief minor upgrade, but still much nicer. Left the house after some banter with my brother, stepping out to the Pound Town theme going to the east. I found this was indeed Pound Town. The house was simply on the outskirts of the to the west. I noted there was no mysteriously grassy field like in a normal pallet town. Wondering about, decided to check in on Red Home. His mother was inside, and when I talked to her, she commented on how handsome Stephen looked, hoping her son would look up to him as a role model for when he became a trainer himself next year, which of course led me to realize this game took place a year before original Pokemon. Red was even upstairs, playing SNES in his room, commenting, I'm going to be the best too when it's my turn. I was starting to like this hack. It was interesting, quaintly new adventure, a different character. Hell, Stephen even seemed to have a history with the people in his town, a reputation, a personality beyond a silent protagonist. The people in town talked to him as a person, making conversation, not just spouting tutorial crap. Even Blue's sister had new dialogue. They seemed to be in a relationship too, as the dialogue ended with a kiss and a heart over the head. Professor Oak simply wished me well, giving me a Pokedex to aid my adventure. He wasn't giving it to me to be the reason behind the adventure like every other Pokemon game out there. He gave it to me out of kindness, something that helped me on my way, a gift. I was liking this more and more with each second. The game seemed to have an actual story now. I was somebody, not just a cookie cutter protagonist anyone could be, not some blank sheet that could be replaced without notice. The story was different than the actual game. The story was different, though the actual gameplay remained unchanged. I went north like I was supposed to, went from town to town collecting badges, received the praise of the leaders. Stephen's fame even seemed to spread as some NPCs would talk like they knew him. I used Miki for every battle, and she was growing surprisingly fast. She handled Brock with ease, even pounded Misty with no trouble at all. She wasn't as adversely affected by super effective attacks as others, did more damage than regular Charmander, which was a veritable powerhouse. She even became a Charizard at the mere level 25. Not bad at all, I must say. Things started to get weird, though, as soon as I reached Lavender Town. I know, Lavender Town is the focus behind every creepy story and the like, but it was the only place that was noticeably different. There was no Team Rocket invasion, which I found odd, though I did remember this was a year in the past, so the invasion wouldn't occur until Red's time. Trying to enter the Pokemon Tower aiming to get the Ghastly, but that's when it got odd. Steven, I have no reason to be here. Steven wouldn't go in the Pokemon Tower no matter what I did. This was weird. I mean, hell, there are a million places in Kanto you really have no need to be. Little random houses with nothing but children NPCs, for example. Why was it here that Steven wouldn't enter? With a shrug, I figured I wouldn't need a Ghastly, seeing as Miki could handle anything, so I simply went on my way. My town serving no purpose other than a passageway with a Poke Center. The game progressed normally from there. The remaining gems fell, and eventually I made my way to the Elite Four and defeated them. As with Blue, my brother Mike was there before me, initiating the championship battle, which Miki swept with ease. The aftermath of the battle was quite pleasant. None of the tension was present between Red and Blue at the end of their match. Brothers congratulated each other on their progress and shook hands. Before the screen went white, no Hall of Fame, nor any credits. When the screen came back, it was at the house again. Two brothers sitting at the computer conversing with each other. Stephen, I don't want to. Mike, come on. I just gotta borrow her for a second and finish the Pokédex. The entry won't register unless she recognizes me as a master for just a second. Stephen, but she's my Miki. Mike, I promise, I'll give her back. Come on, please. Yes or no. I was a bit perplexed, so I hit the no just to be cautious. Mike, come on, please. No. Come on, please. I realized this would simply continue to loop until I hit yes, so I did just to see what would happen. Mike. Alright, this will just take a sec. Then we'll both be Poke Masters. Steven. Dot, dot, dot. Screen changed and the animation showed when two people trade Pokemon, which I found a bit weird seeing as I was solo. But whatever, this was what was apparently supposed to happen. Miki went first. I watched lazily as she began to travel down the trading to snap. That made me jump. The sudden noise resonating in my silent bedroom, loud due to the volume being way up. Looking at the screen, I noticed the game had seemed to freeze. Miki still in mid-trade, but the game wasn't doing anything. With a sigh, I just turned off the game, wondering. With a sigh, I just turned off the game, wondering when my last save was. When the game turned back on, I stared for a moment at the start screen. There was no Charizard next to the trainer. Upon pressing start, I saw the new game option was absent, leaving only continue. This was strange to say the least. So I selected it. The game starting without even showing my stats as usual. My jaw dropped at what I was greeted with 1 year later. The Lavender Town theme came first, playing this normal way. The screen slowly faded in from blackness. Steven was in the Pokemon Tower, which made the music even stranger. Seeing as the tower had its own theme, he was standing in front of a tombstone, not doing anything, wondering what was going on. I pressed A. Steven. Dot. 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 Confused, I tried walking, realizing I was indeed in control at the moment. I brought out the pause menu and checked my party. Miki was gone. Not just Miki. All Pokemon. He had nothing. Pokedex was absent from the menu. His bag was empty, honestly. Concerned now, I checked his trainer card. He had no money, he had no badges. His playtime was 8,795 hours, which was impossible as I only had 30 logged in before. That wasn't the strangest part. His picture of the handsome, confident young trainer was different. His eyes were blank. His face turned slightly down. The smirk of his was gone, replaced by a lack of any expression at all. That long hair of his, before in a perfect perm, was now messy and unkempt. I couldn't look at him anymore. Closing the menu, I wanted to move out of the tower, which, with every step I took away from the tombstone, the screen flickered like it did when a Pokemon was poisoned. Gulping, I brought up the trainer card again. His picture was getting worse. Each step I took, he hung his head more and more. His shoulder slumped. He bent over. By the time I exited the tower, he was on his knees, hands to his face, hair draped across him. I had guessed already what was going on, but this clinched it. I began to put some things together in my mind. I had always wondered why there was no champion in original games beside your rival. Why is it you, the protagonist, had to be your rival when he just waltzed in? No previous champion to challenge. Then it struck me. The answer was right here. The previous champion gave up. His precious Miki was apparently dead, and with her, so died part of him. His Pokedex, the other Pokemon, his badges, his fame, all of it, he threw it away. In that year, the year that I missed, the year where all those hours came from. I even did the match. There is 8,765 hours in a year. Add that to my 30 from before, and it matched up. Even so, the game kept going. It should have been an ending, I thought. I mean, what else was there to do? I had no Pokedex, no Pokemon, not anything. What was I supposed to be doing? I talked to everyone in town, but they all said similar things. Are you okay? Still mourning, I see. Everything will be alright. Please, is there anything we can do? Steven replied to them. Steven never replied to them, and they all simply said the same things over and over. I couldn't put the game down. This was all so strange, curious. I headed off into the tall grass. Eventually got into a battle with a Rattata. No Pokemon was sent out, just Steven's Sprite. I was wondering how I'd battle. Wild Rattata left to be. The battle ended without anything happening. This was certainly interesting, and it happened with every Pokemon I encountered. Wild Pidgey ignored you. Wild Ponyta wandered off. Music never changed either. No matter where I went, louder the town came from the speakers, following me, sometimes slowed down slightly, sometimes not. I searched everywhere, every town, talked to everybody, wondering just what the hell I needed to do. My frustration was mixing with the depressing atmosphere of all of this, making evidence altogether unnerving and uncomfortable, but I couldn't tear myself away. I was starting to get a bit angry though. Nobody telling me anything besides giving me their condolences and trying to give me items like lemonade or coffee. Each met with Steven. No. I slapped myself for idiocy, suddenly realizing how the likely answer was right in front of me. Pallet Town, of course. When I went there though, which took me a long time, having to walk, no Pokemon to fly with, no bicycle to ride, and Stephen only seemed to move half the regular movement speed. It wasn't much different. I first tried talking to Professor Oak. These things happen. You were just unlucky. Next, I tried Blue's sister. Please, don't leave home again. Red's mom wouldn't even talk to me at all, with nothing else in mind to go. I walked to the west, finding the house from the beginning, which I had never entered since leaving Pallet Town. Inside was Mike, but talking to him was just as useless. Mike, I'm so sorry. I pondered for a moment if this really was ending. Stephen doomed to do nothing but run Kanto in misery, haunted by the memories, forced to listen to everyone's concerns about him. As a last-ditch effort to do anything, I went to the bedroom and walked over to the bed. Stephen, I'm going to sleep. Screen faded to black for a moment, but then slowly faded back in. The world having a black tint to it, the Mike's right laying in the other bed. I assumed this meant it was night. Stephen, I, I am going to do it. Do what? Again. I had no idea. Tried inspecting everything in the room, nothing happened. As soon as I left the house, another dialogue. Stephen, it can bring her back. It can do anything. What, what in the hell was it? Something that could do anything. It couldn't. I couldn't for the life of me figure it out. Wondering about, I tried to leave Pallet Town the usual way. Stephen, not that way. He wouldn't go any further. I tried the homes. Stephen, screw them. I quirked my eyebrow at that, forgetting for a moment this was not a real Pokemon game. The vulgarity just took me off guard. I continued to look around, but there was nowhere I could go. Until I accidentally stepped on the ocean, and Stephen walked right in, only the upper half of his sprite visible, like the other swimmers you encounter in Cerulean Gym. I didn't know he could swim. Stephen. The missing one. Missing one? I paused for a moment. No, he couldn't possibly mean that. I haven't tried the missing no trick on this hack yet, but it just fit too well. That had to be what he meant. I surfed all the way towards Cinnabar. Again, I feel something was off, more so than this already was. Silence. My undertone theme had stopped. There was no noise at all, nor were there any Pokemon. I just kept going, finding Cinnabar and surfing up and down the east coast. Lo and behold, Wild Missing No appeared. Stephen. Mine. Wild Missing No was caught. What the hell? Stephen didn't do anything. He just commanded that atrocity of broken data to join him. No, became his possession, and it did. I was getting more and more disturbed by this all. Checking the start menu, I saw Missing No was not in my party, but instead an item, making things even stranger. I checked the trainer card as well. Stephen had his back to me, his long hair draped behind him, his hands in his pocket, nothing else. Remembering what he said at the start of this night, I realized what I had to do. I surfed to land and made my way northeast to where else? Lavender Town. Along the way, I noticed all the trainers oddly still out at this hour. Wouldn't look at Stephen, all of them turning when he passed. Even those that were normally static, I tried talking to one of the officers in the guardhouse type buildings. Just go. They all said the same thing. The one sent chills down my spine. Though they all said the same thing. The one sent chills down my spine. Sometimes dead is best. My hands were sweating by this point. Stephen was about to try the impossible, something some would see as a crime against nature, which many of these people shared that opinion. I steel myself, it's just a game, and I was going to complete it. It took an eternity to reach Pokemon Tower, but it took an eternity to reach Pokemon Tower, but I got there eventually, taking a deep breath and heading towards the tombstone. I remember which one. The image of Steven standing before it was burned in my mind after all. First, I tried inspecting it. Steven. Miki. Nothing happened with a gulp, but the menu and slightly missing note from the bag. Oak. Steven, don't use it. I was reminded when Professor Oak would magically tell you that you couldn't use a key item somewhere, like when using a bicycle in a building, though the message this time was different, even worse. Steven responded to it. Steven. In a world that cheated me, why should I play fair? Steven used it. Steven obtained M at hashtag cash symbol. What in God's name did I obtain? I couldn't tell you, because the game took away my control. Without my input, Steven began to leave the tower on his own, walking single step by step. Town's theme started again as he left the tower and began his excruciatingly slow journey against my will. Every time he crossed one of the borders where the music would change, it got progressively slower, more and more disturbing. By the time he reached Cerulean City, it was a demonic rumbling. I just stared, watching him, trying to guess where he was going, but it was getting more and more obvious. He was heading to Pallet Town. We had all but stopped when he got there, playing a single note by single note. He went exactly where I had guessed, right to his own house, inside and up the stairs. At this point, there was no music. Stephen moved step by step, stopping at his brother's bed, turning to face him. At first, I thought the game froze. He didn't do anything. Simply stood there, and I couldn't move him. I did, however, found out I could open the pause menu. I was terrified to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I selected his trainer card. There was a low growl noise, like the distorted Pokemon cry. Steven was looking at me again, directly at the screen. He was hunched over, his bangs obscuring his face. His hair was wild and feathered out. Between his bangs, there wasn't even a face at all, just black, two red eyes looking straight forward, a white grin contrasting with the darkness. That wasn't all. His name was now S exclamation mark 3V3N. I couldn't look away, my eyes glued to his, not breaking contact for some time. My vision was getting blurry until I couldn't see very well. My face grew wet. I was crying like a baby. Watched him go insane, holding my tears, wiping my eyes. I closed out of the trainer card and tried to save the game. Wanting to just quit, the game informed me this was impossible. Nothing can be saved now. The pause menu wouldn't close no matter what I did, so with no other option, I checked the bag. Nothing happened. I checked the Pokemon, and there was one. A single sprite met me. It had 0 HP. Its status, dead. Its name, M at hashtag cash symbol. I selected it, and I was greeted with 4 options. Status. It's her. Switch. Never. Close. No. Strangle. My fingers shaking. I selected strangle and the menu closed, showing Stephen in the room again. Stephen, goodbye. Snap. The game shut itself off. I was more dumbfounded than frightened. In a bit of shock, I turned it back on, the title screen showing the maniac Stephen and a horribly glitched Charizard. I pressed start, then continue. All I saw was a zoomed out view of Pallet Town showing Stephen's home to the west. Tall grass surrounding it, those unmovable stones blocking it from the rest of the town. The image was completely static. No music, no movement before fading to white. Going back to the title screen, it was as it had been when I first popped it in, a trainer and a Charizard. I attempted to hit continue. No. And that's it. Yep. That was Strangled Fred. I'm too tired to be scared. Yeah. Uh, Jerry, do you have any last words for the stream? Night night. Rest well. Aw. Yeah. Anyway, Danger Noodles, I'm very sorry for doing a late stream. I'll make sure my alarm actually goes off correctly tomorrow. But anyways, I hope you all truly enjoyed. I hope to see you guys next time in your next mission.